All right, we are done at Lowe's and I am headed home. I opted to get a 4-inch bolt instead of a 3-inch. I put it up on the ruler that they have there in the hardware section and just wasn't comfortable with the amount of threads that a 3-inch bolt was going to have available. And so I went with the 4-inch. If it sticks out too far for my liking, I'll trim it down a little bit with the cutoff wheel. The other reason I went with the 4-inch is I wanted the part of the shank that wasn't threaded to extend pretty much through the whole coupler, at least close to the end. And the 3-inch bolt, half the threads would have been carrying the load on the one side. So that's the other reason I went with the longer one. And then I of course got washers and a nylon lock nut, which should be just fine. I got zinc coated. I don't figure it's going to be out in the weather enough to have to worry about how protected it is. And the grade 8s were twice the cost, and it's just not going to be using that kind of weight. This is a light duty trailer, medium at the most. So just some regular bolts that are 1/2 inch thick will be more than up to the task. All right, we are back set up here. I did mark the center of that bracket and the center of the tongue and tried to line them up, but that didn't work too well. So I put on a C-clamp and I've now used my icrometer to get this lined up, and I think we're there. So I'm gonna grab the welder, tack this side. So I just had a mini panic attack, but I think we're okay. I thought about this handle, and I was thinking when I first took it off, when I started the project, that I may get some bushings for this end so that it would be a little bit more stable and reduce the risk of bending up again. And then it occurred to me that the first tongue was like 1 inch and this is 2 inches. And so I just grabbed it, and to my relief, that will fit. And I don't think I'm going to need bushings on this anymore. I mean, it's not exactly a tight fit, but I think it's close enough that it will hold. Probably need to take care of this divot right there. I'm going to fill that with some weld and then file it flat so that it doesn't hang up on that, which... All right, I've got that welded up, you can see. Just slightly, get that to focus. Slightly over on each side. I think that's going to be a nice fill. So now I'm going to grab the file, put this in the vise, and grind her down. All right, I have welded the underside of the support brackets, and the back is done, the top is done. I have this in, which is functioning very well, but I have identified a problem with the handle, with the added thickness of this tongue, and that is that bottom bolt used to be under the old tongue, and clearly this one it's not going to make. So what I'm going to have to do, I'm going to have to think about an option for this. But the top will line up fine and actuate, so it's just a matter of how I'm going to handle the bottom. But now I can turn my attention to putting on the coupler. So I'm going to turn this back around and line it up with the four-wheeler and see what we need to do there. So here is my idea in action. You can see here I'm leveled out. I've got my scrap stock on top of that's how much height that would give me. It's a little bit under the ball, as you can see, which means this will ride just a little bit high, but I think that much high is not going to be a significant issue. So I think I'm going to roll with this. All right, I've got my piece cut here. I went right on 5 inches. Saved the factory edge, which is down here on the bottom. Top one, I'm actually really happy with this cut, but I am going to take a file to it, just kind of smooth it a slight bit. What I found on my second cut, this was my third, on the second cut what worked really well was to just mark the corners for the cut lines. So I mark all 4 corners, and then I cut into the corners of the cut lines, and then I just use my eye to connect those cuts. That worked really well for me. So let me clean this up and then we'll get the end caps on. A welding table would sure be nice right about now, but I don't have one as of yet. So this will have to do. I got to get a little creative to get the ground for this last cap. And I have to also piece it together. You can see I've got a little tiny shim. That's the piece left over from the end cap by the axle. Just filled that space with this other small one. So I got a little gap there, but I'll easily fill that. And obviously my ground is working because I have it all tacked down. So I'm gonna finish welding this, and then we'll have a little grinder work to do. As my friend Joe says, behind every good welder is a good grinder. All right, all the grinding is done, both ends. I put the prettier end at the back since it's going to be more visible. And then threw a C-clamp on it to hold it in place while I drill these holes. Drill them from each side and be able to put the bolts through. Well, that took some work, but finally through. And let's see here, we hold that up. Yeah, there we go. Looks like it should be pretty straight through. I had to 4-step it. My first drill bit went through fine. Went through 3 sides, broke on the 4th one. That's that one right there. So I stepped that up a size, and then my 1/2 inch that I tried to go to, the edges on the drill bit were kind of smashed down, rubbed off. So it only went about 3/4 of the way, or about 1/4 of the way before it just quit cutting. So I had to go to something a little bit smaller, some odd size that I had, but it did enough that the 1/2 inch was able to finally bite and get through. But now let's go line this up on the tongue and see if we can get that piece welded on. All right, so here's my setup. Use the C-clamp to get it flush side to side, and made sure it was flat lying down, and then I used my feeler gauge to line up the front. This one hangs over just a tiny bit, but under the coupler it won't really be noticeable. So I'm gonna put a few tacks on, probably start with one back here, and then hit a couple on the sides, and then we'll start filling it in. So this little Harbor Freight welder that I've had for like 15 years, I pushed it to the max today, but you know, it hung tough. Especially this last weld, I was pushing its duty cycle. And it's running right now. It's been running most of the afternoon, but I'm letting it cool down a little bit before I'm done. As far as the welds go, that's kind of how they turned out, and I'm very pleased with that. That's with no grinding. You can see all the slag stuff is still on there. You know, I am satisfied enough with that. I am not going to grind that. I'm just going to leave it. It will get covered with paint, but yeah, it really welded quite a bit better than I thought. I'm convinced for anything this trailer is going to do that's going to be well up to the task. So I'm going to let that cool for a little bit, and then I'm going to throw the coupler on. Okay, one last thing I kind of forgot about. I will definitely need to cut these bolts down. But you can see how that fits. The threads come up right to the edge right there, and with the washer, that should snug up just about right. So I think this is the right length. We'll just have to cut it off probably about right there. Well, this is the moment, the big reveal. Let's see how it turned out. I'm gonna flip this around and put it on the four-wheeler. We can see what it looks like together. So quite a bit heavier up front than it used to be. Much heavier tongue. But if you grab it right by the tongue, it's not so bad. Okay, so as I thought, it's just a smidgen high on the tongue, but it's really not that bad. If there was water or something in that trailer, it would slope to the back, and that's not a particular problem. I mean, if you put something in it, it might roll to the back, but I still don't perceive that that's going to be a problem, anything we're going to be carrying in it. Let's just see how close we are to level. Yeah, it's not bad. I'll totally live with that. And I don't have a lever on here, but let's test the trailer, the bracket right here that locks in. It's not leaning back, so it's not that far off. I can pull this out with my fingers. Dump function. I think that's going to work fantastic. Yeah, I'm stoked how this turned out. And my entire life, that has never really shut by pressing on it that way. When I did the welds on it, I went ahead and smoothed out this other side. But growing up, we always had to use the handle and pull that lock bar back and then set it down. So for it to work that way, yeah, I'm really tickled at how this turned out. I filled up the tires when I got it up here in the garage. This one has lost a fair amount of pressure already, so it's clearly not holding air. That tire has been on it as long as I can remember, so it's a good 35 years old. So it's probably just time for a new one. The other side got replaced a long time ago. It seems to be holding air. It's got good tread on it, so I won't worry about that one, but I will have to look for a replacement for this. That's something I will most likely be able to put on myself. Successful day. All in all, I started working on this, what, about 1 o'clock? With dinner and everything, this was probably right around a 10-hour job. But not a bad way to spend an afternoon. What's cracking? I'm back at the homestead and hopefully going to get this trailer finished up. I've got new tire. I think I'm going to take a crack at that first. And then I have, I believe, figured out how to get the handle back on so we can have the dump function. And down in the barn, I found this old U-joint. This U-joint is pretty much ruined. You can see the threads right here and right there on either side are stripped. So if this fits, the girth of this will fit inside those holes on the handle, and it looks like it's a little big. So I can either drill this out or find a way to grind that down. And what I'm planning is to weld one side on, of course, and then drill a hole in the other side for a cotter pin, something to keep the handle on, and then just put the handle on it, and that'll be pretty much it. So, tire, paint, and that handle pretty much should finish this up. I'm planning a late one. Let's get to fixing this tire. So changing this tire should be pretty straightforward. To get it off the axle, should just be able to pull this cotter pin, and then there is a washer right here. But with those two out, it should just slide off. So far, so good. Indeed, it pulled that cotter pin and the washer, and the wheel slid off. It was a little bit kind of grimy. So I will hit that with some brake parts cleaner and then re-grease it before I put the tire back on. Looking at this old tire, you can see all the cracks, which were not noticeable when it was on the tire. I didn't look that hard. There are some in the sidewalls that I did notice. It was clearly not holding air. I couldn't exactly hear it seeping out, but it didn't even make it a couple of hours before it was flat beyond reasonable use. It took some elbow grease, but I finally got it. I did have to resort to the high lift jack on the front. I just used the tow hook right here and pressure. The first side took me quite a bit of effort. I had to hit it in several spots. I finally started hitting it with some soapy water. Try to get that down inside the bead so I would get pressure on it and push it down, which would get it to roll but not slide off. And then I just took a paper towel with soapy water and would put it in that crease and then move over to the next spot. When I got about my fourth try, about halfway around the tire, it finally popped. This side was much easier. I only did it in one spot. I got a good bite on it and got it to give, but I just got a nice surprise. Well, I don't know if it's nice, but I just got a surprise. There is a tube in here. I don't know if you probably can't see it right there, but you can see that. All right, the tube is out. This side doesn't look too bad, but you flip it over, you can see that ring of rust. I don't know if that was sitting against one of the seams and got pinched, almost what it looks like, but that could have also just been on the rim itself. So I'll put the valve back in and blow it up and put it over in the sink and look for air bubbles. See if I can find something, see if this is salvageable. All right, the rim is out, and you can see that ring on the inside. It does go all the way around, corresponds with the ring on the tube. There is some also up here on the edge. So anyway, we'll see. I'm gonna go look at the other tire and see if it is tubed or tubeless. All right, I have officially unpacked the new tire, and it does say right here, tubeless, but so does the old one, tubeless right there. but this one also has a tube in it. So I don't have a valve stem to put into that rim to get that tire to work without a tube. So I'm gonna have to go see what condition this is in. I could run down to Fred Meyer and get a tire patch kit if the holes in this aren't too bad. Let's see what we got. All right, I'm over here at the sink doing a test, and the first place I put it in found a hole. Let me see here. Right there, I don't know, yep, there you can see it. So it's leaking out of that spot right there. If that's all it is, I can confidently patch that. But let's see what else we got. All right, real quick before I leave, I went around the rest of the tube. I did it both sides, submerged it. I suspected that the valve might be leaking a little bit because the valve didn't look great when I took it out, but it seems to be holding just fine. The only hole I found was that one. And then I also tried to scrape off all the rough scale of the rust. I got most of it. What's still there is smooth to the touch for the most part. I first tried using a nylon brush, and that just wasn't aggressive enough. I didn't want to use any sort of metal and risk puncturing this in a bunch of places. So I went for something that has a good flat edge to it, a little aggressive, but not sharp enough to bite in. And what I found was one of these rulers off of like those Stanley multi-gauge things. And so I just took the edge and we just rubbed it around like that and went around both sides. It's not perfect, but I feel better about it, so I'll go with it. So it's just about 9 o'clock. I'm going to run down to Fred Meyer and get a bike tire patch kit to fix that hole. And we should be back in business tonight if I can get there in time. I've patched a fair number of motorcycle and bicycle tubes in my day, so I'm pretty confident in this process. I still brushed up on the instructions just in case, because it has been a while. This has pre-cut patches in 3 different sizes. I think for this hole, the small one will actually work. Put these others aside for another time. Okay, first thing, scuff the area. Instructions say to overlap the patch by about 1/2 inch on all sides with the scraper. All right, I think we're there. Next, cover the area with some rubber cement. Yep, that's plenty. I'm gonna go ahead here, do a little tug on this, and see if I can get a little of that glue inside that hole. Certainly can't hurt, okay. All right, there's that. Now that's starting to tack up just a little bit. These particular patches, they said orange side goes to the surface of the patch. And then they also said to be sure not to touch the patch. So, trying to, oh. I thought the orange ring was what went down. Nope, it's the orange side. Okay, all right, we've got our glue tacky here. Double check where my hole is. Right there. And now, pull off the clear layer. There we go. And then they said push it down, and especially make sure to push down the edges. Let me bring you up close. Okay, so got good sealing around the outside, I think. I'm gonna give that a few minutes to let that glue kind of finish curing, and then I'll take it back over to the sink and double check for additional leaks. All right, got it puffed back up. That patch spread out nicely, seems to be adhered on all sides. Let's dip it in the water here and see. All right, let me bring you in here. And I'm not seeing any bubbles out of there, so I think we're all set. Let's get this tire back together. Before I try to put the tire back on this rim, it's a little rusty and gunky, particularly on this side. So I'm gonna see if I can clean that up a little bit. Even though I've got a tube in it, just feel better knowing that this is cleaner inside and there's less abrasive stuff to potentially cause a leak. So, and for this, I'm gonna use a steel brush. All right, I just gave it a dry scrub, got all the superficial stuff off, and I'm satisfied with that. The end result, that's how much I got out. We are now at one of my least favorite parts about fixing a tubed tire. Getting the second side on without pinching the tube and causing another leak. But that's where we are, so nothing to it but to do it. I've already got the tube in, of course, and I've put the valve cover on. It's probably not big enough to keep the valve from pulling through the hole, but hopefully it will help. If it does start to pull, I can catch it or something. Since I already have some soapy water from when I was getting the old one off, I'll go ahead and use it, although I have typically done this dry, so maybe that'll help and I'll be a convert. I do have a little bit of the tube getting pinched with the tire right there. All right, got it pushed out of the way, hopefully without issue. Okay. All right. Okay, preliminary look. I'm not seeing the tube sticking out anyplace else. So let's put the core back in and go pump it up. And the nice thing about a tube is that that'll set your bead for you. The new tire is on. It took me a minute to get the bead to set. The tire, tubeless, is rated to 28 PSI. I had to take it up to about 45 to get the bead to pop, but it finally did. And now it is back down to pretty much 28, might be a smidgen under. Looks like it's a little overinflated to the eye, but that's where it's at. And I cleaned and greased the axle bearing area right there. And I figure while I'm at it, I might as well pull the other side off real quick and clean and grease that one as well. At long last, the tires are done. It took about 3 hours longer than I expected, but we're there. Because I have two different brand tires, I have two different load ratings. The new one is rated for 630 pounds or something like that at 28 PSI. The now old tire is rated for 415 pounds at 14 PSI. So I split the difference and went 20 PSI on each one and plan on about 500 pounds as a top rating for this trailer. So next, before I can paint it, I have to finish doing the welding, which means I need to get the handle put on. My battery's about dead, so I'm gonna go plug this into the charger and I'm gonna work on that and I'll show you the progress. So I'm really pleased with how these came out. The two pins for the handle. Not bad for freehand cut and drilling. All right, I think that's where I want it. I did some measurements, some actual measurements, and a little bit of micrometer. So that's just barely hanging on there with that C-clamp, so I'm gonna gear up quick and get a tack weld on that top end. All right, I've got those pins welded on. Their handle is operating nicely, but I now have a new problem that I didn't realize before. This one's an easy fix though. The cotter pin that I got to replace the original that was going through right here, it goes through the bar, so when you pull this, it actuates that. The new cotter pin is too short by like an inch. So I'll probably end up just getting a bolt and putting through there. I'll just get one that's long enough, the right size, which is actually not very big. At this point, as far as this little green trailer goes, I think I am ready to hit this tongue with some brake parts cleaner, get any factory oil, everything off of it, and then hit it with a coat or two of Rust Reformer. All right, we've got a layer of paint, actually 2 good coats. I'm just waiting for it to finish flashing. You can see there's still a couple of glossy spots. That pin still pretty wet. So I'm just kind of waiting for that to dry up a little bit more, and then I'll lift the bottom up, turn those two over, hit the bottom side, 2 coats once again, and then this one will be done.